Let's open it up to y'all holler out a question. I'll repeat it, and then away we go. Yes, sir, in the blue shirt.
How do you unleash America's energy?
Yeah.
From Alaska.
Yes, sir.
To our coast.
He's asking the question of how do we become energy independent? How do we create the jobs? What would be my plan to make America more energy independent? Is that a fair enough way to put it? Well, listen, when you heard me talking about removing the burdens on the job creators, the energy industry in America is a great example of that. And the fact is, I am an all of the above energy guy. Now, I have a little asterisk by corn-based ethanol. I think that one has got some problems, and I think they're going to start moving out of those subsidies, and they realize that government can't go pick and choose the winners out there. But wind energy and solar energy and biomass, I am a supporter of nuclear energy. The matter of fact, we've got 3 plants that are permitted in the state of Texas. And, you know, and my heart goes out for the folks in Japan and what they've gone through and just that massive tragedy. But the fact is, we don't have tsunamis in Texas. I mean, and that state is an ideal state to be building nuclear power plants. So the fact is, natural gas, which is, we don't know where all the natural gas is in this country. We find in fields in Pennsylvania, up in the Bakken, in the Marcellus over in Pennsylvania, as I mentioned, in the Haynesville, down in East Texas and Louisiana. The Eagle Ford is a monstrous field in South Texas that we didn't even know was there 10 years ago. We need to free our country to go and explore. But this administration is sending messages. You know, I will tell you this. We finally have an energy policy in America at long last. And it is to make us as dependent on foreign sources of energy as we can be. And that is wrong. It is wrong for American jobs. It is wrong for our national security. Free those agencies of the onerous leadership at the top. The EPA coming into the state of Texas, telling us they're going to take over our air permitting process because they don't like the way we're doing it. Now, you remember the refining capacity that we got in the state of Texas. We cleaned our air up in the decade of the 2000s more than any other state in the nation. 23% reduction of ozone, 57% reduction of nitrous oxide. And by the way, those are real pollutants, not to be confused with CO2. Okay? But this administration wants to come in. Hydraulic fracking and the question marks that they're asking about hydraulic fracking. Without that, this natural gas that is in these shale plays can never be produced. You go to the Gulf Coast, and whether you're Louisiana, Mississippi, or Texas, and the jobs that have been lost because this administration's decision to not allow the permitting with any type of rapidity going forward. You know, and it kills me. I mean, I got folks in Texas and Louisiana, and Bobby Jindal is a great governor. He gets it. He's a great competitor. But you've got him over here, and people losing jobs in Louisiana because the president or his administration won't let the permitting process go forward. But this president goes to Brazil and delivers $2 billion to that country to help them with their offshore drilling projects. What are they thinking? We need to be getting the energy industry going in this state. And we need to be looking for ways to reduce the regulations and the cost instead of getting them on right here.
Yeah. As a former Air Force captain, are you going to ever have our military lead from the behind in Libya?
No, sir.
Lead from the rear?
No, sir. No, sir. We're going to know why we're going in, and the message is clear. We're going to stand with our friends. Israel's not ever going to have to worry if I'm the President of the United States. We're going to be standing with our friends. And if you are our enemy, we're not just going to give you some lip service. If you try to hurt the United States, we will come defeat you. And that is a clear and a powerful message to those that will not be friendly to the United States. Seriously.
I mean, what did your legislature overturned you
Yeah.
on that executive order? What did you learn from that whole
Right.
experience?
He asked the question, the HPV, human papilloma virus, and I signed an executive order that allowed for an opt-out, but the fact of the matter is I didn't do my research well enough to understand that we needed to have a substantial conversation with our citizenry. I hate cancer. Let me tell you, as a son who's had a mother and a father that are both cancer survivors, the governor who passed a $3 billion effort in 2007, it's a 10-year investment to find the cures for cancer. I hate cancer. And this HPV, we were seeing young ladies die at the early age. Now, what we should have done is a program that, frankly, should allowed them to opt in, or some type of program like that. But here's what I learned. When you get too far out in front of the parade, they will let you know. And that's exactly what our legislature did, and I saluted it, and I said, Roger that. I hear you loud and clear, and they didn't want to do it, and we don't. So,
Thank you very much.
enough said. Yes, sir.
When would you hope to get us to a balanced budget?
Well, as soon as we can. When would I hope to get us to a balanced budget was Mr. Tucker's. And obviously the question is as soon as we can. But the reality is, I think you come in there. We'll start using executive orders as soon as we can, obviously to slow down Obamacare. Stopping that is one of the first things that we have to do as a country and as a people, because it will bankrupt this country. And then putting in place the tax structure, putting in place the regulations, putting men and women into those agencies that are overseeing the EPA, the FDA, places where we know that there's problems about strangling job creation and growth, and putting committed pro-business men and women into those places.
Governor,
Yes, sir. There's hands going up everywhere. Somebody just get after it.
the spending in the government, 43 cents of every dollar is borrowed. It gets me, how can the average American not understand? You look at a home budget, how can anybody survive more than a couple of years? How do you communicate that as president and say, we got to turn this thing
The
around?
reason is because you do not have a printing press at your house. That's the big problem. That is the reason that we must pass a balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution to clearly say, if it's not coming in, we're not going to spend it. And I think one of the great things that came out of this debt ceiling debate was that the American people now truly understand a lot better how things work in Washington, D.C., and they are not happy campers.
That's critical.
Yes, sir.
Governor, as a success in Texas, which we all know you are, you had to get to that position by employing compromise at times. What is your position on compromise as opposed to what Washington's position is on compromise?
Well, there's certain values that you don't compromise. I mean, there are certain things in my life. I'll tell you, for instance, my faith is something I'm not going to compromise. When I tell folks I'm not going to raise taxes, for 10 years I hadn't raised taxes. And those, when you give someone your word, whether it's on the issue of something as important as morality, or whether it is something as important as your taxes, then to me that's the important message here. Do we compromise on pieces of legislation? Do we come in? Yes, there are things that go on all the time that we compromise on, but not on the important issues that you've raised your hand and said, I swear to you, we are not going to raise taxes. And that's how I was raised. And, it's been that way for 61 years, and I'm not thinking it's going to change.
Illegal immigration.
Yes, sir.
Illegal immigration.
Yes, sir. That's a pretty broad subject. Here's the issue. Before you can talk about the issue of immigration reform, illegal immigration, what have you, you got to secure the border. The idea that we can have a conversation about any type of immigration reform without first securing that border is just nonsense. And I understand this pretty well because I have the pleasure and the privilege and the honor to represent a state that's got a 1,200-mile border with Mexico. We understand they're our number one trading partner. We understand the importance of being able to do trade. But we also understand that 41,000 of our friends in Mexico have been killed since '07 by these drug cartels. There are places along the Mexican border that it is a war zone. I mean, where the cartel has us outgunned. Yet we've got a president of the United States that came to El Paso some 6 weeks to 4 weeks ago and pronounced that the border with Mexico and the United States was safer than it ever was in history. Now I don't know where I have no idea where he got that from. But he's not talking to people who live and work along that border. It is dangerous. We're spending $152 million in Texas of our own tax dollars to help support the law enforcement along that border right now. But you can secure it. And the way you do it is you put boots on the ground. Substantial number of boots on the ground. We've asked this administration for some years for 1,000 National Guard troops to put on that border, to augment both the Texas Ranger recon teams that we have, the local law enforcement, our federal Border Patrol. I mean, Border Patrol, some really fine men and women, but they're just outgunned and outmanned. You put those boots on the ground, and in preparation, and I'm just talking about the Texas border, so just 50% more for the rest of that border, another I think 600 and something miles from El Paso on to Tijuana. But you have those boots on the ground, and then in preparation have 3,000 additional Border Patrol, and probably another 1,000 to go on from to the Pacific. And then you use the aviation assets that we have. I mean, we know that there are Predator drones being flown for practice every day because we're sending them and we're preparing these young people to fly missions in these war zones that we have. But some of those, they have all the equipment. They're obviously unarmed, but they've got the downward-looking radar. They've got the ability to do night work and through clouds. Why not be flying those missions and using that real-time information to help our law enforcement? Because if we will commit to that, I will suggest to you that we'll be able to drive the drug cartels away from that border. And hopefully, 2012, we're also seeing an election for the Mexican presidency as well. And that an individual who will be elected that year at the same time that hopefully will elect a new president, and those two individuals can sit down in a trusting way and really deal with this issue of these drug cartels, because they threaten not only that country's existence, but we cannot stand to have a country that is not as strong as it should be in Mexico. Okay. Yes, sir, in blue.
Coin a Texas phrase. We all here in New Hampshire, a lot of us live in small communities.
Yes, sir.
As you will travel throughout the state, you will see people from small communities, people without jobs,
Yes, sir.
small business owners needing help.
Yes, sir.
Every candidate that comes to the state of New Hampshire needs to understand there's a lot of votes out here.
Yes, sir.
Can you address small business,
Yes, sir.
small communities?
Yes, sir. The gentleman asked me if I could address small business and small communities. And folks, I can go small community with you. That's how I grew up. We didn't even have a post office. The city that my wife grew up in had about 4,000 in it, probably about the size of this township that we're in right here. We understand small town values, and we understand small town business. But they're frankly no different from a mom and pop business in Houston, Texas. And the issues go right back to those four principles that I talked about. If you get overtaxed, overregulated, overlitigated, that's what kills business. And both at the state level and at the federal level, we have to have men and women who understand that don't spend all the money, and have those taxes low, have the regulations. Look, we all want to live in a country that takes care of our air and our water and educate our children. But for the life of me, I don't understand how anybody in New Hampshire would want a faceless bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. telling you how to educate your children. I don't think you want some faceless bureaucrat telling you how to take care of your air and your water here. This is your state. These are your people. You care about them. Now, you know, if you're getting down to the local level, sir, and you're talking about, you know, regulations and rules at the local level, that's another thing. I'm not running for mayor, and I'm not running to be the speaker either. So, but at the federal level, we need to have some common sense brought back into the to the discussion. Yes, ma'am.
Governor, you certainly touched on a lot of subjects. My biggest concern is entitlements, and it seems like since the Johnson administration, we've become such an entitled society, you owe me. And we have 51% of the people in the United States that have no vested interest because they don't pay taxes. How are you going to address this? Because everybody, including the Republicans that are in that Congress now, seem to be so afraid of touching this. So how are you going to explain to people we need to address this before we can be held to account?
I think everybody understands it. I just don't think there's a lot of courage out there. That's the bigger issue. I can assure you, during the course of this campaign, we're going to lay out an idea. Matter of fact, Bill and I were talking about as we were coming over here, how do you help transition this country? Because if you're I can promise you, my 27-year-old son, Social Security under the program that we have today will not be there. If you read my book, Fed Up, you hear me call it a Ponzi scheme, and that's the fact. I mean, there's no getting around that. And having the courage to call it a Ponzi scheme, I think, is the first step in us having a national discussion about how do we deal with these entitlements, where that they don't bankrupt this country. And frankly, they're still in place in some form or fashion to be able to tell people, listen, if some things don't go right in your life and you get to this certain age, you're still going to have a fund that you have paid into to take care of the needs that you have in your older life. And I'm not afraid of having that conversation. Do I have a plan yet to lay out and say, here it is in black and white? I don't. But I can promise you, as I said in my remarks, these challenges are not overcomable at all. We are Americans, and we will find the way to do it.
Youth unemployment is a disaster. Me and my friend here are wondering, what are you going to do to ensure that we have a good chance to find a job after college?
Yeah. Daniel asked, I think, a very poignant question. The unemployment rate in America is a little over 9% right now. If you're an African American, it's about 16%. If you're Hispanic, it's 11%. I don't know what it is for the younger age, but I'm going to suggest it's probably up close to 20% in this country. And the same way that you get America working, that we talked about in the broad sense, is how the young people who are just getting out of college are going to find those jobs. You got to free this country from the massive debt that's hanging over your head like a dark, dark cloud. And you do that by starting and understanding that we're not going to spend all the money. That I can assure you that a president of the United States who is not afraid to go to Washington, D.C. and be absorbed by that culture up there, who's not going to Washington to be liked, but to do what the people of America have asked them to do, we will stop spending the money unless I run out of ink in a veto pen. But to get back to those principles that I talked about, have an adult conversation about our tax code and how we lower it and broaden it. Where people in the no matter what industry you're in, know that you're not going to be over-regulated, that you're going to be spending, I mean, the tons of money that gets spent by different industries out there because of some regulator or some legislator that thought it would be a good idea if we did X. And on its face, it may have looked fine until you figured out how many lawyers, how many accountants, and how many additional people you had to hire. And then the hundreds of thousands of lawsuits that go forward that cost us probably billions of dollars in this country. That's how you get America back working. And it's also how we have a future for you. This is one last question. Anybody that wears that color pants, you got to win.
You've answered a lot of policy questions tonight, Governor. Thank you very much. I work in the energy sector. My wife works in healthcare. I'm going to go off policy and ask you that Barack has nothing to run on as far as a record.
Right.
He's going to take the gloves off and go after you personally. Are you ready to go back at him and get things done and win this race? That's my
Texas style.
Can I share with you just one little short story?
I love stories.
In 2003, I was elected, I ran for the first time as the governor. I'd been governor as I was elevated from lieutenant governor. My name ID might have been 30% if you gave him a few hints. I ran against an individual who spent, we think conservatively, $50 million in Texas just on negative ads. Now, there was about 80+ million that he spent totally, but about 50 million of it we think was probably negative, either in direct mail or radio, you name it, I got called it. And we spent $20 million. We got outspent 4-1 in that election. But we talked about what was important to the people of the state of Texas. We talked about creating jobs, and we talked about making government where it really worked for the people. We won that race by 18 points, 58-40. Americans aren't interested in a bunch of negative rock throwing and what have you. They're interested in solutions. They're interested in the story that I talked about today in multiple places about a future that's bright for a young man like Daniel. Because they know that there's going to be an America here that is not in debt up to its ears. They know that there's going to be an opportunity to have a great job. There's an opportunity that they're not going to be overtaxed, overregulated, over-litigated. You're going to hear those three terms so often that you can give them, and then we will know we have won. Because that is the message for America. God bless you all, and thanks for coming out here and